Hi folks, welcome to this video on training methods. Okay, again, one of the potential essay topics. There are four broad-ish categories that I've tried to group this into to try and make a little bit more sense of it all. You are not going to get asked a question on all four of these. You're going to get asked a question on one of these if this topic comes up. And sometimes they'll even subdivide it even greater than that. So we're just going to have a quick look at each one in turn. To make sure that we can answer all the questions on it. So as you can see, we have got continuous interval and fartlek training. We've got weight resistance and circuits. We've got flexibility and mobility. And we've got plyometrics. Plyometrics, I'm going to leave till last. Plyometrics is very much an A2 topic. They love questions on plyometrics on second year A level. It's never come up at AS so far. So we're going to have a little look at, if it does come up, what are the likely points that you need to know without going into too much A2 theory. With these, we've had questions on circuits whenever on weights and resistance, but I've grouped them all together and hopefully you'll see why by the time I've done it. Flexibility and mobility has been up twice before, and continuous interval and fartlek methods of running, as they like to call them, they've never been up yet. So, you know, it's important that we go through these to make sure we're happy with absolutely everything. Okay then folks, so firstly, methods of running continuous interval fartlek training. Okay, well, the problem is, it's never been up before, so how do we know what the examiner is looking for in their mark scheme? Well, we don't know 100% yet. But we can use, a bit of what's on the specification, what's on the textbooks to come to a few conclusions about this. So we've got continuous interval and fartlek training. Now, I may be wrong. I probably am. I usually am. I think it's unlikely that you're going to get a question for 7 marks on one of these. It's more likely playing 2 off or all 3 off against each other. When would you use each one? So very, very briefly, continuous training, what can we say about it? You run at a set pace, i.e. we don't speed up and we don't slow down. The classic example of not a continuous run, but a fitness test that uses this principle is the Cooper run, where you've got to try and run as far as you can in 12 minutes. Now, I bet all your PE teachers told you, try and run at the same pace. Don't try and sprint early because you'll have to walk later on. And don't walk early and then save it all for a sprint at the end. What you've got to try and do is run at the same pace all the way through. And that is an example of a continuous run. Okay, so you've got to run at set pace. There are no breaks. Okay, and you run for a set or fixed time or distance. I am going for a 3-mile run, a 20-minute run, with no breaks, no rest periods, and I'm going to try and maintain the same pace. That is a continuous run, okay? Obviously, use it very good for distance runners, because that's essentially what they do. But it's also very good for beginners trying to get into fitness for the first time. There's no big sprints or anything like that. It's quite good for people like that, okay? Interval training. What do we do is rest and work periods. Okay, as you'd expect, there are intervals, rest and work periods. Now, here's something that a lot of people forget, and it could potentially be worth more marks if you put it like this. How can you set up, who does interval training? Distance runners do interval training. They will do like a mile or 2 miles as quickly as they can, and then have a rest period and go again. So they do long work periods of minutes or miles, and then have a rest and then repeat. And that is aerobic training, because it's a distance runner using your aerobic systems. However, sprinters, Usain Bolt, will also do interval training, but he won't run for minutes or miles. He will do meters, 50 meters, 60 meters, 80 meter sprints, so short work periods. Classically, walk back recovery, go again. That's another form of interval training, but that develops your anaerobic fitness because you're working without oxygen. So you can mix it up. Classic ways of doing it, if I do a little thing here, is to do, you could do 4 times 5 minutes or 5 miles if you was doing the aerobic training, or you could do 4 times 50 meters if you were a sprint trainer. So interval training can be good for aerobic endurance, stamina, or it can be good for developing speed. And the question is, let's go back to the title at the top, methods of running. It doesn't say that it has to be long distance running. But I would always put both down. It might be worth more marks, okay? Finally, fartlek, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, it's Swedish for speed play. What do? You vary the intensity all the way through your run, okay? How do you do that? You can go on different terrains if you want to. Run uphill, run downhill, run on flat, whatever you prefer. Run on sand. A friend of mine who lives down south runs on the sand dunes as part of his training. Much harder to run on sand than it is to run on compact ground because the sand gives way and you've got to work harder. So he does a bit on the concrete and then runs onto the sand. That's an example of fartlek training. But you could also do a mixture of walk, jogs, sprints. Another friend of mine who's a bit mental, there's a big long street where we live, and he will walk from one lamppost to the next, jog to the next lamppost, and then sprint to the next lamppost, and then walk to the next one, jog to the next one, sprint to the next one. That's fartlek training. You're varying the intensity. As a result of both of these things, it's very good for games players. What do? In all your team sports, you vary the intensity at which you run. So that's how we could handle questions on methods of running. And those are the things that I think the examiner would be looking for in a question on that topic. Right, so let's move on to flexibility or mobility training. Remember, this is training. This isn't warming up. This is training. How do you make a muscle longer in order to reduce the risk of getting an injury? Okay, so static stretching. Key thing about static stretching is you take the muscle to end of range, okay, and then you hold it in a fixed position. Static meaning still. So your classic one of taking the muscle to end of range and holding it there. Now, because this is training, you're holding it for a minimum of 30 seconds, not 10 seconds. That's what you do in a warm-up, okay? Or doing stretching for 10 seconds. Holding stretch end of range in a fixed position for around about 30 seconds. That is a classic static stretch. So dynamic stretching is opposite to static. Again, we're going to end of range. If you're not taking the muscle to end of range, you're not stretching it, but you do it through movement. So leg swings, arm swings, things like that. So keep emphasising this. I've got to take it to end of range. An active stretch, very straightforward. You stretch yourself. So you could do an active static stretch. You take yourself to end of range and you hold it in a fixed position. You also do an active dynamic stretch. I swing my leg in order to get it to end of range. So an active stretch is you stretch yourself. You are actively doing something. You are stretching yourself. Passive stretch is the opposite to that. You're stretched by a partner or by an object. You might get a skipping rope, throw it around the top of your foot, lay on your back and use the skipping rope to pull your leg into a stretch. So you are using an object or using a performer to pull your body into a set position. But again, always taking it to end of range. Finally, ballistic is bouncing into a stretch. The most dangerous one, increased risk of injury, and just making sure that you take it nice and steady. It's often said, you should never bounce into a stretch. You should. It's absolutely fine to bounce into a stretch as long as you're taking it steady and you're not throwing yourself into end of range and then throwing yourself back out of it. Nice, steady, gentle bounces. There's absolutely no problems with that, but it does carry that increased risk of injury, particularly if you're inexperienced at doing this type of stretch. Just to finish off on flexibility, there are some golden rules, okay? Number 1, never, ever, ever stretch into pain. Don't do it. You should feel it, but it shouldn't be painful. Always warm up first. Don't stretch a cold muscle. Do a bit of a jog, do a bit of work to get some heat and temperature into the muscle. It makes it more elastic. And always wear appropriate clothing. We used to say always wear loose fitting clothing, but the vast majority of sports ski these days is compression stuff. Your lycra leggings and your tops. That's not loose fitting, but that is absolutely fine to stretching because it stretches with you. So the classic line now is always wear appropriate clothing. There's just two other things that sometimes come up on this. Okay? Why? What are the benefits of doing all these different types of stretching? Okay, well, we can reduce our injury risk by being more flexible. Okay, I can reduce my risk of getting an injury. One that we forget, but it's obvious. Better technique. If I've got more range of movement around my joints, I can reach, I can grab, I can tackle, I can kick better because I've got better range of movement around my joints. So it's very, very important that I put that one down. And why have we just done those two at the end? Flexibility or mobility has been up twice. In both occasions, it wanted these 5. What are the types, methods of flexibility or mobility training? But then there was always a little bit of an add-on. Why do it? Or what are the benefits of doing it? Or what rules do you follow, essentially, when you're doing stretching? So just be aware of those as well. Read the question carefully. What is it getting at? Okay, weight resistance and circuit training. What I will say very, very quickly is that one has been up, circuits. Weights and resistance haven't. So again, for weights and resistance, we haven't got a mark scheme to base an answer on. But again, let's use our common sense. There's a reason why I've grouped these together. What did you get marks for saying when the circuit training question came up? It was about how would you plan a circuit? And you got credit for saying the following. Now, sorry to dump that all you in one go, but let's just deal with it straight away. What did you get marks for saying with circuit training? You got marks for saying that circuit training is based on stations and exercises. You got marks for saying that you work targeted or set muscle groups. You got marks for saying that you base the circuit on reps, sets or time. So on each station you do 30 seconds or you do 2 sets of 10 or something like that. In between each station you get rest and recovery periods. You can order the exercises in 2 ways. If you've got beginners, you can alternate it. Now what we mean by that is you could do a station that works the arms and then move on to one that works the abs and then one that works the legs and then back to the arms again. So that way those arms are getting 2 or 3 stations off before they've got to work again. That's great for beginners because it's giving them longer recovery. However, if you've got an expert or an experienced performer, don't alternate it. Hammer them. Do arms, 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 legs, 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 abs, abs, abs. And make them work harder like that because they want to improve their fitness to a greater standard. When you're setting up a circuit, you've got to think about the time you've got available. You've got to think about the space you need and your equipment demands. And you've got to think about the age and the ability of the people that you are working with. They're the factors that you need to take into consideration when you are designing a circuit. Now, why, come back to my original thing, why have I put these together? Weight training and resistance training. Weight is using weights. Resistance is, again, using weights, but also using my own body weight, dips, pull-ups. Can use kettlebells, medicine balls, things like that. I can't see a question on these two where you are not going to get credit for that. Weights and resistance training. It's based on the number of exercises or stations you do. You target the muscle groups you want to do. You do it in reps, sets and time. You need rest and recovery periods. You order the exercises differently for beginners than you do for experienced performers. You base it on the time that you've got available. You base it on the space and equipment that you've got available. And you base it on the age and ability of your performers. So I can't see how the mark scheme for circuit training is going to be that different to weight and resistance training. Okay, but again, it's going to be reading the question, and if it is, how do you set up a weight or a resistance training program? I can't see it being different, the answer being different to that needed for a circuit training program. So you need to know all of these factors in order so that you could set up a program effectively for a performer. Finally then, plyometrics. Left this one to last for a reason. Could it be that it's fallen out of favour on AS because it's now very much an A2 topic? probably, it's come up on A2 quite a bit and in quite a bit of detail, and we definitely do have to focus more on it at A2. But let's just briefly cover plyometrics to make sure that we're not stitching ourselves up. So what is it? I bet some of you are thinking, I've never really heard of it before, but I bet a lot of you have done it. Plyometrics is about power development, speed times strength. So I'll quickly put that in there to remind us that that's what it is. Speed times strength. So how do I develop speed and strength? By doing the following exercises: hopping, jumping, bounding. When you're doing like things like bunny hops, when you're doing things like that, what are you doing? You are shifting, you are jumping and lifting your entire body weight, but you are doing it very, very quickly. So the strength is the lifting of the body weight, the doing it quickly is the speed element, that times that equals that. There's your power development. So it's hopping, jumping, bounding exercises, but also things like clap push-ups to develop power in the upper body. There's a classic upper body power development. The strength is doing the push-up and lifting your body weight, but the fact that you're doing it so quick that you leave the ground with enough time to do a clap, there's the speed side of it. It develops something called hypertrophy, however you want to pronounce it. Basically, it increases muscle size, increases muscle mass. So very, very good for athletes who want to put on size and want to develop their power. But again, why did I leave it till the end? You would set up, or you do set up plyometrics training based on how you set up circuits and weight training, as we've just said in the previous slide. Okay, you do it and you target the certain muscle groups, the ones that you want to hypertrophy, the ones that you want to, like I said, if you want to develop upper body power, you do lots of clap push-ups and things like that. If you want to develop lower limb power, the power in your legs, you do your bunny hops and your bench jumping and things like that in order to develop power in the right muscle groups. You do it on reps, sets and time. I've seen people say, I want you to do 10 bunny hops, but I've also seen, I want you to bunny hop for 10 seconds or 20 seconds or something like that. So you can set the exercises up as you see fit. You're then going to give them rest intervals in between again, like you do on circuit training and weight training. You can then order the exercises how you want to do it. High-level performers, put all leg exercises together. Beginners to plyometrics do an upper body, lower body, alternate them a little bit. And it's also dependent on age and ability. So a lot of the ways that you set up a circuit and a weight and a resistance program, you use to set up a plyometrics program as well. So they're the key things that I would be looking for if I was answering a question on these topics. Hope you found this useful, folks. Make sure you can get these points down. Remember, one of these will come up. Or could come up, sorry. You're not going to get an essay saying talk about the methods of training. They ain't going to be that generous. It's going to be talk about flexibility or circuits or methods of running. That's what you've got to do. You've got to be able to make 7 or 8 points to get your top marks on each of these topics. Best of luck with it, folks.